So Jeffrey, he didn't have any friends. He went to his shed where he spent time with dead animals. Boys start experiencing spontaneous erections. The difference is that typically those changes occur in the presence of same-age peers. Whereas Jeffrey, those changes occurred in the presence of death. He is popping erections when he's digging around in a dead raccoon. That's going to pair. And that paired really hard.
No pun intended.
It's behavior bitches.
Okay, so now I know when we spoke originally, you were telling me about like this, was that your thesis that you did on Dahmer, or what was it?
That was actually just a little funsies project I did for a presentation.
Okay, so, and I was like, can you send it over? So you sent this project over, and actually, if I have your permission, while we talk about some of it, I want to know if like when we put the video up, if there's like a few slides that they could see with your permission, because it just, some of it's easier to see visually. I love how you put this Jeffrey Dahmer, this behavior analytic conceptualization up here. It's a beautiful, for anyone, if you're listening in the car, I'll try to do my best to explain it, but you also will have this available on YouTube. I love how you put it into the beautiful primary unit of analysis that we use in ABA, the ABC. Also, I just want to say, like, Dahmer's a good-looking guy.
Yeah, he very much was.
I mean, and he's on trend. These glasses have come back in style, so he could definitely fit in Brooklyn 2025.
Yeah.
So, okay, so let's take a look at what you did here. So I want to take a little bit and kind of take this episode to doing a little bit of a case study, a mini case study on Dahmer himself. And I think it's something cool also for if anyone is studying for the exam. Okay, this is like, I'm going to preface this for a few people. If you're studying for the exam, this is a great example of how we look at all these, well, in the 3-term contingency of the ABC, but we also look in the 4-term contingency, looking at the MOs or the setting events beforehand. And if you're someone who loves crime, this is going to be interesting for you because we're just talking about crime. So whether you're a crime junkie person or you're a BCBA, or a lot of BCBAs happen to love crime as well. Like the weirder the behavior, the better, right? Mm-hmm. I think that was always my thing. Like, okay, enough verbal behavior. Like, okay, if anyone wants to do it, they could do it. I want to know the weirder the behavior, the better. So here we go. Okay, so I love this. And by the way, again, anyone studying, please look at these slides that we're sharing here because this is just like straight up. So I see you did the 3-term contingency. You put it into looking at the SDs versus the S deltas, right? Anyone studying SD, S delta, discriminative stimulus, and a S delta. So when we're talking about that, we're talking about the SD, or that discriminative stimulus, is signaling reinforcement available. And you put that as what for Dahmer? You said that was the
opportunity. So in law enforcement, they tend to talk about things in terms of means, motive, and opportunity.
Okay.
So if we can align some of our terms with those terms that they use, we can see that we don't really do things a whole lot differently, but we just have a bit of a different perspective.
Amazing. Okay, so you said the opportunity. So like an SD would be like there's an individual over there that is like a perfect target, right?
Yes.
Versus like, oh, that person's with a group of friends. That would be an S delta, signaling like not available for quote unquote reinforcement, right?
Correct.
Okay. Mm-hmm. And then you talk about, which I also love that you put here, because you said in law enforcement, you talk about the motive, that they use that word as well. And so you're talking about motive is essentially the MO, right? The motivating operation. Mm-hmm.
Yes.
So if they have motive, that would be an establishing operation.
Yep.
Meaning like an establishing operation, for anyone who doesn't know, that is when you actually value the consequence being offered there. So it's like, if I have motive, I'm going to be interested in the potential that there's a perfect victim available for me there, an SD standing there available for me to go engage in. What are the behaviors that Dahmer engages in? I see that you wrote some target behaviors here.
All right. So the first one that I looked at was this behavior of doing a Dahmer. Basically, he was making a fool of himself. He did this in school and in prison. So I analyzed that one. His taxidermy, his alcohol use, and then from here on, we get into behavioral chain. So we have
Ooh.
alcohol use, drugging of a victim, murder, evisceration, necrophilia, and cannibalism.
Guys, if you're studying, this episode is money. Okay, so all right, so the next ones we go into that. Okay, and then we get into the consequences. So when we get into the consequences, you're talking about what were the consequences offered? Was it reinforcement? Was it punishment? And I guess we'll see depending on what the behavior was and whether he does it again. If he does it again, we know it's reinforcement. And if he doesn't, it is punishment. And then you also break that down into whether it's a socially mediated or automatic consequence, which I think is interesting as well. Meaning, did it involve someone else or was it solo? So let's get into that. Let's go on to our next slide over here. And also, if there's anything you want to add, please do. But the next part, I saw that you called it setting events, which was to me was a lot of like MO. Like, let's get this background information to see where this is coming from. Can you tell us a little bit about Dahmer's background?
So, as a child, we know that genetics are playing a large role in psychological growth and behavior, and we find that Joyce, Jeffrey's mother, she suffered from severe anxiety, borderline personality disorder. She engaged in a few suicide attempts, which Jeffrey found her and had to call the police and all that. She also experienced hyperemesis gravidarum when she was pregnant with Jeffrey.
Can I just ask what that is?
Yes. So hyperemesis gravidarum
is vomiting.
Is a condition. Yes, a condition during pregnancy where it's severe vomiting. And
I only knew because can I tell you how I got that? I was in Canada. Yeah. It was crazy, and I was like, the bar was offering me a drink, and I was like, no, I'm not drinking. I'm nauseous. And they're like, we have a medicine, and he's like, oh, do you want a medicine? I was like, oh, you guys sell that at bars here? He's like, no, I have my personal. It's called Gravel or something. And so I literally, I just did stimulus equivalent. Everyone, just not to brag, but I did. Okay, keep going. You are okay. And also, I was like, in America, they would never give out drugs of theirs. They'd be so scared of a lawsuit. Okay, keep going. Oh, so she had severe vomiting.
Yes. And current research has actually shown quite a significant correlation between mothers who had HG during pregnancy and their children having autism.
Wow.
Yes. Lionel, Jeffrey's dad, he exhibited autistic traits himself. In his autobiography, it's called The Father's Story. I had so many pages dog-eared where he essentially talks about life as an adult autistic man. He mentions that he never knew how to be a son, how to be a husband, how to be a father. He had to do research and read books to figure out what these roles were supposed to be and then act accordingly. So my suspicions are that Lionel was high functioning, because we know that those individuals on that kind of higher functioning side, rule govern behavior is a big thing for them. And that was from Lionel's book. Lionel relied on rule govern behavior and routines for sure.
So he was like seeking those rules, which actually, like when I worked with a lot of high functioning, that was always my thing, like the high functioning older teens, adults, like that, the seeking. And again, when you work with one individual with autism, you've worked with one individual with autism, but that like seeking out, like, give me a rule for this. So like, if I'm going up to someone in a group, like, tell me like how do I do it? Like, do I go up? Oh, so every time I go up, I'm going to talk about Justin Bieber. It's like, no, not every time. You're going to listen in for 5 seconds. Then you're going to see what they're talking about. Now you're going to think, how can I connect this to something that, like you're actually giving those literal rules. So he was searching for that.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. And once Jeffrey started kind of growing up, some of those autistic traits were also seen in Jeffrey. And there have been sources that talk about how Lionel and Joyce actually sought out essentially early ABA therapy for Jeffrey. They sought out some sort of behavioral therapy when he was around 4.
I'm sure it was not the ABA that we have now.
No.
It might even be the ABA that gets a bad name. Who knows?
It
It
probably
was.
would have been.
Just guessing based on timing. Okay.
So then he had some significant childhood events. He had a hernia surgery when he was about 3 or 4, and he had some issues with the anesthesia. And his parents reported that he was not the same after that.
Wow.
His mom's behavior, we know about social learning theory, right? So Joyce is exhibiting all of these dysregulated, suicidal behaviors, and Jeffrey witnessed, what happens when mom does this. Well, mom doesn't have to go to work anymore. Well, mom gets to lay in bed and have her food brought to her. So he's learning these maladaptive behaviors through his parents.
Oh, so there was like a lot of modeling.
Yes, a lot of modeling.
Mm-hmm.
Lionel, Jeffrey's father, was a doctorate level pharmacist or chemist. And so he was away a lot. And so, unfortunately, Jeffrey didn't have that male figure. He spent a lot of time with his mom, who did not attend much to him because she was more busy attending to herself. So that, I believe, is the root of some of these attention-seeking behaviors that we see, particularly the doing a Dahmer, which has an attention-maintain function. So I believe that could be some of the root of that.
It actually makes me sad. I mean,
It is really sad.
It's sad, and I swear, I don't know if it's like I've become more aware with like age or just like talking to so many people or being in the behavior space. I'm like, that parent relationship at a young age is like so important. Like,
Yes.
I mean, maybe also like literally in every area of my life, whether it's like I'm dating or this or that, like you talk to people, you see like how much people are carrying with them. It's wild. Okay. What is this next part? Bones under the house?
Yes. So when Jeffrey was young, Lionel was doing some work under the porch, and there was a very strong smell. And so Joyce said, Lionel, get in there, get it out, whatever it is. And Lionel pulled out a dead possum or raccoon, some sort of small animal. And it was completely decomposed, basically into bones. And Jeffrey was fascinated. And he picked up the bones and he started to play with them. And he said, they're like fiddlesticks. And Jeffrey was, I believe, 6 or 7 at this time. And right, normally we might be a little put off by that, hey, that could be a red flag here. Lionel, who is likely on the spectrum himself, did not catch that. All he saw was, hey, my kid who has no interests is interested in something. I can shape this. Maybe he'll be a doctor. Maybe he'll be a surgeon. This is good. Let's build up this interest for him. So he came from a well-meaning place, but the effects were not what he had hoped.
Wow. Okay. All right.
Yes.
Tell me more. Also, this reminds me, I need to make sure I scheduled my hernia surgery.
Oh, yeah, do that.
Okay, we have that in common. Next.
So then at age 17, Jeffrey's parents divorced. Lionel established a new relationship with a lady at work, and he moved out of the home and into a hotel, essentially. And so it was Joyce, Jeffrey, and Jeffrey's younger brother David living at home when Joyce decided that she was also going to leave. She was going to take David and leave. So,
And leave Jeffrey?
Jeffrey, yep, Jeffrey is 17 years old, still in high school, and he is now living at home alone, completely unsupervised with no parents.
Makes me sad.
This is, I know, it's very sad. This is when Jeffrey started to drink. He had already discovered his homosexuality, and he had a lot of self-hatred around it. So he drank. He attempted to change. I have this in here. He also attempted to speak with Lionel about his homosexuality, and Lionel shut him down. He said he didn't want to hear it. He didn't want to talk about it. So Jeffrey did attempt to seek help, and he was not reinforced. He was punished. His behavior of speaking about the things he needs help with were punished.
Ugh. I'm sad.
So, yep. So he continued to shove it down inside of himself and try to ignore it, try to make it go away. It did not.
Okay. This got dark before it even got dark. Okay.
No, we're setting events.
We're just an MO. No, but this is so important. And by the way, how can someone apply this to, like, when you're working with an individual anytime? I just want to say, if anyone, I do also, like, something I like to do is, if like I have a platform that anyone's listening on at all, whether you're studying or you're BCBA at all, like, I just want to remind people all the time, like, that background information matters. Like, I know a lot of times, like, our science is known for being like, I don't care what the diagnosis is, I only look at behavior. And I think I was like that more too, like, was a new behavior analyst. I'd be like, we don't care about label. The only reason that you would need a label for autism is so that, like, insurance would cover your therapy. But, like, aside from that, I don't care whether it's Down syndrome, this, that, ODD. But, like, I do want people to, like, remember that these things do matter. And it's not because, like, to give a label, right? Because, like, if I were going to give Dahmer a label, I'd be like, you're a fucking psychopath, right? And looking at him. But look how this stuff matters in terms of, like, it's these little things that it's like, oh, like, if you actually look at the background information, putting this is separate to, like, what he did later on as, like, horrible. This is actually sad, right? Like, to look at this as a human. And so I just, like, want people to remember, when you're looking at these things or when you're working with a client, and again, I'm not trying to, like, say anything that he did is okay, but I'm just saying, always, whenever you have a new case or you have something you're looking at, that background information matters. So make sure that you are looking at that and keeping that in mind as you're going through, like, what is the learning history? What's happening here? What has been reinforced in the past? Okay, rant over. Next.
And I think
slide.
too, with our push towards trauma-informed care, trauma-informed ABA, we really need to pay attention to those learning histories, because trauma causes behaviors. Trauma changes our bodies and changes how we respond to certain SDs.
Absolutely.
In my abnormal psych class, I tell the story all the time of a little boy who had a history of parental abuse, and we were working with him, and he was doing great with his work. And I went to give him, I said, "High five, dude!" And he doesn't have a punishment history with
For
me.
anyone who didn't see that, she just did, like, a dodging away.
Yeah, like a flinching.
Yes, that's what it was.
He doesn't have a punishment history with me. I have never harmed that child. But this is an SD for pain. Simply raising your hand. So knowing that, we altered how we reinforce. But and with my background in psych too, as a behaviorist, right, we don't like mentalism, but I like that I am able to come at it from the psych perspective, the sociological perspective, the forensic perspective, the behavioral perspective. Like, I think the more ways and the more
Absolutely.
perspectives we can look at something, we can get a clearer, bigger, more holistic picture.
Totally. I love that. I agree. Okay, so now let's take a look. And by the way, this is like a full CEU worth on its own over here. So let's just go through which behavior should we like. Let's choose a few of them that we go through and talk about like antecedent behavior, consequence.
All right, so we will start with alcohol use, because Jeffrey, he had an alcohol problem, obviously. Um, he would use it as his medicine in class when he was in high school. He was drunk during the first murder of Stephen Hicks. He dropped out of Ohio State University due to never going because he was always drunk. He was discharged from the Army for being drunk. He had a drunken, disorderly, and indecent exposure charges stemming from being drunk at a carnival and then like peeing in public. So the SD for his alcohol use, we have a couple. Either he's home alone. In that case, the EO is an aversive emotional state. He is experiencing unpleasant emotions that he wants to get rid of, so he drinks. When he is at the bars and the clubs, under that SD, the EO is typically sexual desire, because of the next step in the chain. So the response effort for alcohol use is fairly minimal, right? You go, you buy a bottle, and you drink it. It's pretty simple. The consequence that he experienced when he was home alone and trying to get rid of these aversive emotional states, this was automatic negative reinforcement. He was able to successfully get rid of those aversive states. And that was a fixed ratio schedule. Every time he drank, he was able to achieve that. And the function of that would be escape. For the second SD, where he's at the bars and clubs, this is a social positive reinforcement. He is using alcohol to gain access to gay men in bars. This is a variable ratio because it didn't always work for him. Some nights he'd be able to meet someone, some nights he wouldn't. He went home alone. The function of this is attention.
And as we all know, a variable ratio schedule maintains behavior at the highest rate. So even that, like, let's say he's on a variable ratio of 10, like about every 10 people that he hits on, he gets to bring home. That's a slot machine, baby. Maybe next time he's going back. So his behavior was definitely maintained.
Exactly. Yes. And the function of that behavior is, I put it attention and tangible. Attention, because at this point, the other individual must be willing to go home with him. But at a certain point, that individual no longer becomes an individual, it becomes an object to him. So that's why I function of attention and tangible, because what he's really trying to do is access their bodies. He doesn't care about the person inside. He wants to access their body.
Creepy. Okay.
So now that's the first step in that behavioral chain. We move on to drugging. So this behavior involves, he would crush up halcyon and put it in his victims' drinks. Typically, he would bring men home from the club. So he would buy them drinks, alcohol use at the club, bring them home. Once they are home, he would crush up the drug and put it in a drink. So the SD for this drugging behavior is he has identified an attractive victim and he has gotten them home with him. The EO is going to be physical and sexual deprivation. He talked at length about how he just wants someone to hold, and it's more about their body at that point than about the person. Response effort for this is minimal. Crush up some pills and stick it in a glass and you're good to go. Type here is social positive and social negative. The reason for that is because how I frame it, social positive reinforcement in the sense that he now has access to an unconscious body. Social negative, because he now no longer has to worry about that person running away
Right.
or escaping because they're unconscious. So it serves two purposes for him. The schedule for this is a fixed ratio, except in one instance where he accidentally drugged himself.
Whoops.
Yes. Yes, that
So it's
was
that fixed
whoopsies.
ratio because it works every time. He's like, why would I go hit on people at the bar on a variable ratio when I could just bring them home, lower effort?
Exactly. Yeah, yeah. So the function for this is access to tangible in the form of their body and escape from the chance that they will leave him. Because Jeffrey inherited Joyce's severe borderline personality disorder, and with borderline, fear of rejection and abandonment is the biggest issue. And Jeffrey talks at length about how he just didn't want people to leave him. He wanted people to stay with him, but they always leave.
And is he having sex with them or is he snuggling
Yes.
them? Okay.
He is snuggling. He will the sex will come typically after they are dead. So we'll get to that in our chain here too.
Okay.
So after the drugging, then we have the murder. Okay.
Martha.
So the behavior is pretty self-explanatory. He's murdering people. The first murder occurred in 1978, and then there was a 9-year hiatus. So this tells me that there must have been a factor that was sufficiently punishing to cause an extreme drop in that behavior for 9 years. And what I suspect happened was he eviscerated, which is another one we'll talk about. He eviscerated his first victim, Stephen Hicks, and he put him in garbage bags, which he put in his car, and he was driving to the dump. And he was stopped by the police. And the police said, "What are you doing out here? It's like 4 a.m. Well, you got a bunch of bags in the back seat. What are you doing?" And Jeffrey said, "Yeah, I couldn't sleep. I'm just taking some stuff to the dump, you know." And the cop let him go. So it's possible that that incident scared Dahmer enough into not murdering for this 9 years. There might also have been other factors, environmental factors. You know, there was a time where he moved from his mom or his grandma's to his own place, you know, which is where most of the murders took place. There was a time where, you know, dad sent him to Ohio State University where he was not murdering. So there are a lot of environmental factors there as well.
Wow. Okay.
But the first murder, the SD for this is he has to be left alone. He would not murder with his parents around. He would engage in some of the evisceration when his grandmother was
Can we
home.
operationally define evisceration?
So the definition of evisceration is to mutilate or take apart the body of a dead victim. So he talks about how he would engage in the evisceration of his victims with his grandmother in the house, but he knew that she could not walk all the way down the basement stairs, so he was fairly safe down there by himself.
Creepy.
With his first murder, yes, very. With his first murder in 1978, he was denied access to a preferred item. He attempted, so he found Stephen Hicks hitchhiking on the road, and he said, "Hey, get in. We'll go to my house. We'll smoke some weed. We'll drink some beers, and then I'll take you to your concert. We'll lift some weights." So Stephen Hicks said, "All right, we could do that." Went back to Jeffrey's house.
Hey,
and
get
they
in,
had
bud. We'll smoke some weed, drink some drinks, lift some weights. At the lifting weights, I'd be like, I'm good.
Right? That's where I would have been like, no. And so he gets back there, they have a couple of beers, and Jeffrey kisses Stephen Hicks. Stephen Hicks then becomes defensive, kind of shoves him. Dude, I'm not gay. What are you doing? Get me, let's go. We need to go. Bring me to my concert. Let's go. And at which point, Jeffrey becomes very upset, picks up one of his weights, clubs Stephen Hicks over the head, and kills him. So the EO for this was deprivation, emotionally, physically, and sexually deprived. All he wanted was someone to care for him, someone to cuddle with, all of that. Now, the response effort for murder is high. It's not an easy task.
Right.
I don't know if you experience, but from what I've read, it's not an easy task. And so the response effort is high. But if you think about the alternative behavior, which would be using appropriate social skills to gain and maintain friendships,
That's way
Dahmer
higher
didn't
effort
know-
for him.
That's way higher. He doesn't know how to do that. That is not in his repertoire. So that is higher response effort than just murdering people. So that's what he went with. And the type of consequence here, we have social positive. He now has access to the body. Scheduled variable ratio. I say variable ratio because not everyone that Dahmer tried to kill was killed. We did have some survivors. Function here, access to tangible, right? I have not put attention here because now this individual is dead.
Dead.
They are not providing any attention. It is simply a tangible to Dahmer at this point. And sensory. He enjoyed it. It gave him some sort of automatic positive reinforcement to kill people.
And it's finally giving that his brain that stimulation that he needs to feel anything.
Correct.
All right. Next in the chain, where do we go?
Next in the chain, we have necrophilia. And some of these chains can be moved around.
Okay. And what is operationally defined necrophilia?
Necrophilia is the act of engaging in sexual intercourse or sexual acts with a dead body or dead body parts.
Ooh. Okay.
So, necrophilia and evisceration can be switched back and forth. Sometimes Dahmer would have sex with the dead body as a whole. Sometimes he would mutilate them and have sex with just the parts.
So he'd like leave their bottom half on just to like be able to have sex with it?
Yes. Yep.
Like it's too heavy to carry the whole dead body weight.
Correct. Yep. Or he might just use the head. He might cut the head off and just use the head for sexual purposes.
So he's like making like a human fleshlight.
Exactly. That's exactly what he's doing. Yes.
Ugh. Okay.
Yes. So with necrophilia, the behavior are these self-reported sexual acts that he has discussed. He talks in his interviews about how he molested his victims before and after evisceration, how he used certain body parts for certain sexual satisfaction. So the EO here for necrophilia is sexual deprivation. He has not been able to have a successful sexual interaction with a living being, only dead things. So the EO here is sexual deprivation. He is feeling some sort of sexual desire. The SD is murder or evisceration. Okay, you cannot engage in necrophilia without having a murdered victim,
right,
or an eviscerated victim. That's why it's a chain. The response effort here is minimal. Sex is the most primitive behavioral response that we have, so it's very easy to engage in. The consequence, we see automatic positive, right? Dahmer gained sexual satisfaction from this behavior. on a fixed ratio schedule. Every time he engaged in necrophilia, it was enjoyable. And that function is sensory, much like any sexual behavior.
Oof. All right. Which leads us to our next one.
Yes, evisceration. So this involves dissecting, dismembering, mutilating, dissolving, or pulverizing body parts. Although he did keep many body parts, he kept skulls, hearts, genitals, typically in his fridge. So the EO for this is he wanted to evade capture. It is much harder to get rid of an intact body than it is to get rid of multiple small body parts.
Mm-hmm.
So the point of this was he wanted to evade capture. He needed to figure out how to do that. The SD, the piece of the chain that occurs immediately before, is either going to be murder or necrophilia. Now, the response effort for this is very high. Dahmer himself actually talked about how hard it was to pulverize and dissolve those bones, which he then put down the drain in his grandma's house. He said it was one of the hardest things he's ever done. So that response effort is very high.
She must have quite the garbage disposal.
Right. Yeah. I don't understand how she, maybe it was willful ignorance, but yeah, red flags everywhere.
Whoa.
So the type of consequence here is social negative, right? He is trying to evade capture. He's trying to evade negative consequences for his actions. This was on a fixed ratio. Every time he eviscerated the body, he was able to dispose of it without getting caught. So that function would be escape.
Wow. And so he was reinforced because he just didn't get caught.
Yep. Yep.
Wow.
And then the final piece of the chain is cannibalism. He discusses how he ate hearts, liver, biceps, thighs, glutes. He would fry them in his kitchen with some butter and onions, and then eat them. So he wanted the core piece of this was that Dahmer wanted someone to be with him at all times who would never leave him. And he felt that by eating a person, they will stay with him forever, that he has ingested them and now they are a part of him forever. So the SD for this must be the presence of an eviscerated murder victim. You can't have access to pieces to cannibalize if you don't have someone in pieces. EO, it started as curiosity. Dahmer himself said that the first time he engaged in cannibalism, he was just curious about what it tasted like. After that first time, he found that he liked it, and then he said that he has this desire to keep the person with him. The response effort is minimal. Same level of response effort as cooking dinner at night. The type of consequence here is automatic positive. He gets some sort of pleasure from engaging in this behavior. It's a fixed ratio schedule. He gets this pleasure every time he engages in the behavior, and it's a sensory reinforcer.
Does he freeze the pieces to be able to eat later, or he'll just eat it at once? So he can just he has them with him at any time. Miss you, take out a thigh.
He kept quite a few pieces in his fridge, but then quite a few in the freezer. I believe he had 2 heads in the freezer, and then in the fridge, I believe he had heart, liver, 1 head, and a set of genitals.
Okay. Okay, so Dahmer, what led to him getting caught?
he had a victim who escaped. He had had victims who escaped before. Conorak sent this in phone. He was a young boy. I believe he was 13 or 14 that Dahmer had lured by telling him, "Hey, you look very nice. I'm a photographer. I'll pay you $50 to take some pictures." So Conorak says, "Yeah, all right, that sounds good," even though he knows that Dahmer is the same guy who killed his brother. So he says, "All
knows
right,
that?
yes, he knew that." And he actually confronted Dahmer and said, "You remember my brother?" But Conorak escaped after Dahmer had drilled a hole into his skull and started pouring acid inside of it. Dahmer's goal there was he wanted to create a zombie who would stay with him, would have sex with him, would not leave him.
Oh my God.
Conorak stumbled outside, bleeding, naked, and Jeffrey's neighbor, Glenda, she said, "This is not right. What is happening?" So she called the police, and the police come, and Dahmer, he had gone to the liquor store, and so when he came back, he saw Conorak sitting on the ground, bleeding, with cops everywhere, and Glenda said, "That's him. He did this." And Jeffrey was very smart. He knew that he was in a black neighborhood, a gay neighborhood, and he knew how law enforcement felt about black and gay individuals at that time. So Jeffrey simply said, "Yeah, that's my boyfriend. We got in a fight. He's drunk. It's a gay thing. Just let me take him home." And they let him take him home because they did not want to deal with the gay stuff.
Oh my God.
There was a point too where the final victim who did escape and brought the cops back, the cops came and Dahmer opened the door a little bit and he said, "You don't want to come in here. There's a lot of gay stuff around. You don't want to see that." And they said, "I don't care." And they came in, and that's when they found the Polaroids of the murder victims.
And then Dahmer, so when he was interviewed, he was honest about everything
Yes.
and like proud of it.
I do think from what I've watched, I do think that there was shame there. He has an extremely flat affect. Um, he his speech, and this could be autistic traits. It could be low arousal traits, but his affect is very flat, and his speech is very monotonous and flat. But I do believe that he was being honest.
Wow. Wow. You know, I've like watched Dahmer stuff in the past, but it's like I like watched all these different things and I didn't like take it in. But like it's so interesting to go through it from a behavior analytic lens, how we're able to take these complex cases and how you like so beautifully put it into the 3-term and the 4-term contingency. And so with that, that kind of leads me to my last question. How do you feel as behavior analysts we can really help the field of, you know, forensics or criminal justice by coming in with a behavior analytic lens?
I think that our biggest contribution is going to be that function-based assessment and looking at what is the function of this behavior. Police do that, but they don't go past that. They say, "What is the motive?" Okay, you have a motive, so that makes you guilty. We take a little bit more of a
But are they,
nuanced.
for example, like anything that I watch with crime, like I don't anything that I've seen, they'd be like, oh, motive, like he was cheated on, or you know, like things like that, or there was someone else in the relationship. But I like are they, and I don't know, you tell me, are they breaking it down into like such like basic, whether it's like, attention, escape, or something as basic as like, look, a lot of these could be tied to deprivation of attention or deprivation of sex or like any of these unconditioned reinforcers. Are they looking at that or no?
I will occasionally hear something like that. It will not be put in that language,
Mm-hmm.
but like one of my YouTube channels that I watch all the time, that chapter, he actually has a little dance, a little thing that he does when it ends up that the motive was life insurance money, because it is commonly life insurance money that is the motive.
Yeah.
But if we talk about that in our terms, right? Tangible. Okay. Well, you might think of another case where a woman separates from her husband and he throws acid on her and says, well, if I can't have you, no one can. Okay. So that's attention, right? And escape. So they don't look
Right.
at them like we do. But I think even just engaging in that translation, just translating law enforcement speak to behavior analysis speak, I think that we can conceptualize things in a way that allows us to be helpful in some
I
of these
agree.
investigations.
It's amazing. Well, oh my gosh, this is a lot and juicy and a topic I love to talk about. And I think anyone who's like a crime lover is going to be here for this. If you're not a
We
crime
didn't
lover,
even get to the we didn't even get to the respondent conditioning of Jeffrey's sexuality.
tell me, tell me about the respondent conditioning of his
Let me tell you.
sexuality.
Okay, so Jeffrey, around age 8, started getting into taxidermy. Okay, he didn't have any friends, so after school he went to his shed where he spent time with dead animals. He did that for years. Normal sexual development, right? Boys start experiencing spontaneous erections, all of these different physical changes. The difference is that typically those changes occur in the presence of same age peers. Whereas Jeffrey, those changes occurred in the presence of death. Through classical conditioning, classical pairing, he is, popping erections when he's digging around in a dead raccoon. That's going to pair. And that paired really hard. So hard to the point that Jeffrey could not achieve sexual
No pun
satisfaction.
intended. No pun intended.
Yes. He could not achieve sexual satisfaction with a living creature. It required death for him to finish.
Whoa. Wild. So like during that stage of development, that's what he was around. And so that's what was paired. Are we thinking?
Yep.
Whoa.
Yeah. We also do know, though, right, that he did develop same sex attraction. So it wasn't that he was only experiencing these sexual situations in the presence of death, but it was a big part of it and a big part of why he became a necrophiliac. But he clearly had some other sexual experiences in the presence of boys, because he ended up a homosexual.
Wow. So, and never did he go after females.
No.
Interesting. Very
He
interesting.
also went predominantly after black men. He preferred their physique. So a lot of people were freaking out that Dahmer was a racist and he was killing black men, and he infiltrated the black neighborhood so he could have access to these victims. That wasn't really the case. He lived in the black neighborhood because it was cheap and he was poor. And he adored the black male physique. He loved it. He was
Like
an
better
amateur
endowed.
photographer. Well, perhaps I leaner, more athletic looking. Um, he he spent, because he was an amateur photographer, and a lot of his photography did center on black male torsos.
I mean, I've seen a black male or two who's in amazing shape. Whoa, Jeffrey.
Yeah. So it's just so interesting. There's all these little factors that just work together to create this perfect storm of Jeffrey Dahmer.
Wait, okay, I don't know if this is going to be on the video or not, but I remember we actually did like a class on this one time. Is there something he did with like painting the penises or something?
I know that he had multiple skulls that he had like bleached and whitened, and he was intending to use as like an altar.
Ugh, my God.
Yeah.
Okay, I must be mixing up murderers. I know there was something once in a class we did, but wow. You have explained this. I mean, it's completely behavior analytic, which is like a very interesting angle to look at it from, and it's crazy. Like, just like even the emotions I feel from it, I'm like, the beginning is like so sad, like this kid, life. And then on the other end, I mean, obviously what he did is horrendous.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, very interesting. So thank you.
And that to me is why early intervention is so important. Because if we can catch some of these like pre-psychopathic behaviors and intervene when they are young, hopefully we can nip that in the bud, teach them some appropriate alternatives, and get them on a pro-social path.
Absolutely. That is a takeaway. So thank you for sharing. I completely agree. Well, Presley, thank you so much for giving us the time for this. I mean, this is just fascinating. And I just like seeing it through like the contingencies is amazing. And you did such a great job explaining it. Thank you for coming on. Can you tell everyone where they could find you?
Yeah, you can find me. I'm all over the place. I'm on LinkedIn. We have a Facebook group for the forensic behavior analysis special interest group. Feel free to join that. We also have a website, crimeandbehavior.com. That is myself and two fabulous colleagues. We call ourselves the Crime and Behavior Analysis Academy. So you can check us out on any of those places.
Thank you so much. This was fascinating, interesting. I think Martha behind the camera here and myself, our jaws are like on the floor. I'm trying to keep mine together to say things, but this is just whoa. So thank you. I'm so happy we can make this work. I appreciate it. And you know what? I could see another episode coming. We take another case and do some kind of breakdown.
Let's do
I
it.
love it.
I'm all for it.
Thank you so much. Guys, you know where to find us. You can find us on behaviorbitches.com, Instagram at behaviorbitches podcast, Facebook at behaviorbitches podcast, YouTube. Everyone go subscribe on YouTube. We really are trying to build a community there with doing these on video. Apparently people like to watch video. So we're doing this and I'll tell you it's a lot more work. So please at least go subscribe there, give a like, leave a comment. That's Behavior Bitches podcast as well. And as for now, that's it. As always, love ya. Mean it.